need these skills to navigate life.
Everyone agrees that they wish they'd had personal finance education.
What are you seeing as the impact of these classes and the education that they're getting?
Our real kind of long-term aspiration is building generational wealth and financial freedom for not only our young people, but their entire families.
Welcome to Beyond the Frame. I am sitting here today with Kerry Woodward, Executive Director of Financial Scholars, and your focus is?
We provide financial empowerment, education, and opportunities to high school students and their families.
Amazing. And we met actually through a connection through Clark Capital. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about Financial Scholars, where you guys work, and really kind of in layman's terms of people that maybe haven't thought about this. What is the need of your, and what are you supporting with your nonprofit?
Sure. So we were introduced by Clark Capital, which was one of the founding investors of Financial Scholars in 2020.
Amazing.
Folks who work at asset managers and alternative asset managers in the financial services industry, like Brendan Clark, recognized that there was an opportunity for their businesses to give back and serve a community impact interest that was directly aligned with their business. And that was helping to provide financial literacy education to high school students in our city in Philadelphia. What they saw was, in kind of taking a macro view, students were not learning personal finance in school. At the time, in 2020, only 16 high schools offered a personal finance class in Philadelphia, representing only 21% of the students in Philadelphia. In the past 5 years, we've grown that, where we're now serving 55 high schools and serving 5,000 students here in Philadelphia. And that's a really important advancement in knowledge, but also equity, because we were in a place where students in Philadelphia had 1/3 the level of access to personal finance education as the greater Commonwealth at the time back in 2020, and we've now rectified that. So we got to work in 2020, brought a coalition of folks together who cared deeply about this work, and we started to ask schools what we could do to help them to start personal finance classes in their school communities.
That's amazing. And so the focus of this education is not it's around personal finance, mm-hmm. right? I imagine there's a value from creating sort of this hopeful group and pipeline of people that also are going to get into being the next generation of asset managers and wealth managers and that sort of thing. What are you seeing as the immediate impact? I know we're at 2026 right now, so 6 years. What are you seeing as the impact of these classes and the education that they're getting, for the students themselves, maybe their families, the information they're bringing home? What does that look like?
Well, we run a 4-part program, and the thesis of ours is that schools are community hubs. And so when we can bring knowledge, financial knowledge into schools, we are bringing them to full communities. And so we're teaching students personal finance in their classrooms every day. But then we're going beyond that to bring students out of their classrooms into offices, to our Teen Investors Summit and other amazing events around our city. We're running a paid internship program, which gets at that talent cultivation aspect that you just mentioned. And then finally, we're running adult financial empowerment workshops where we're having parents and caregivers learn an accelerated version of what's happening in school with their students so that they can have family conversations around money. And our real kind of long-term aspiration is building generational wealth and financial freedom for not only our young people, but their entire families, both the older generation and the younger. So that's the long-term hope. But in the short term, what we're seeing is students' financial knowledge growth growing really, really strongly over the course of a semester or year-long class. Their financial knowledge grows by 56%. Wow. This is on topics like budgeting, banking, credit, taxes, investing, buying a car, buying a house, how to afford college, all of the things I don't know about you, but I really wish I had learned when I was in high school.
Right. You're serving underprivileged communities, right? And schools in these we talked off camera. Because you're in Connecticut now too, right?
We are, yeah.
And what are the areas that you described?
Yeah. So we are most focused now on the areas of highest need. So here in Philadelphia, that's the school district of Philadelphia, where we see low income rates of 75% or greater, and schools that serve greater than 75% Black and Hispanic students. Up in Connecticut, we're focused on the Alliance school districts, which have comparably high need student populations. They are the lowest school districts in the state of Connecticut. And so that is where our focus is, but it must be noted that personal finance is needed for everyone. It's a universal need in our country.
Yeah, I think it's something I've definitely talked to folks about on a personal level and outside of, this podcast where it's crazy that we don't have that. That's almost more important than, I don't want to say more important. Teachers are going to get offended.
Maybe more relevant.
More relevant. I mean, it's something that affects everyone. There's no question that you can't navigate. You need these skills to navigate life. It's important to be well-rounded in your education, I would argue, but a lot of us are going to specialize someday in something. No, you can't specialize in non-personal finance. Like we all need it, right?
Exactly.
Is there a focus on other schools too? Like, are you seeing this, for folks, I'm just thinking about this now. I have an 11-year-old. I don't think, maybe it's too early, but I don't think there's been any personal finance in his life. Actually, I have a very funny video, which we might have to pull up and drop in here, from actually pandemic, where I was doing some marketing video for our video production services, and I had him on my lap, and he just goes, they should make great videos so they can buy money for food. That was the way that he described it as at that time, like 6-year-old. Yeah. So needed a little personal finance vocabulary. But are you seeing this as something that's growing in the other communities as well? Is it happening? Is it not? What's sort of happening out there?
Well, I also have an 11-year-old child, so we can talk more about that. He is hearing about personal finance a lot in our household. But I think we're part of a national trend here that's very exciting. And that is that state legislative bodies are mandating, or we like to say guaranteeing, personal finance education for students. Pennsylvania was the 25th state to enact this legislation statewide in December of 2023. They decided that personal finance ought to be part of every student's education. This is public or private across the entire Commonwealth. Starting next year, every high schooler will need to take a semester-long personal finance class in order to graduate from high school, which is fantastic.
It's amazing, yeah.
And that is a trend that continues to grow. Delaware became actually the 30th state to enact that legislation just back this December for a few years in the future. And Connecticut, part of the reason we're up in Connecticut is they also have this legislation. So we love seeing this personal finance guarantee. I think it shows, and this is always, by the way, bipartisan legislation, which is really exciting because what else is garnering bipartisan support right now?
Right.
But everyone agrees that they wish they'd had personal finance education, that it's something that every student ought to have before they enter the world of adulting.
I love it. I always like to ask the question that might be, the outlier question or things that are more challenged. Is that a concern for your nonprofit that these laws are now in place where it has to happen? And, does that create issues or opportunity?
Right now, opportunity. And also, I would love to work myself out of business someday.
Love it.
It is our vision that not in the short term, but in 5, 10, 15 years, I hope that undergraduate teaching colleges are teaching personal finance teachers just like they teach biology teachers how to teach. It needs to be that way. It needs to be sustainable, and it needs to be integrated in our normal systems. Until that day comes, these school districts, especially historically under-resourced higher needs school districts, need implementation support, and that is where we are here to answer the call. We've been at this for almost 6 years now.
Yeah.
We've been training teachers. We've been implementing high-quality curriculum and opportunities, and so we're here and ready to do this, and we're really very privileged to be able to do it free of charge to our school partners, thanks to the generous contributions of our supporters.
Amazing. And just to clarify, are you starting at a high school level, or do you go sooner than that?
We are just focused on high school for now, although we are champions of the fact that personal finance ought to be integrated K through 12 and beyond. I think that we are seeing lots of different kind of one-off lessons that would happen throughout a child's elementary school education that would help them to grow into where they would have a culminating or capstone class like the one that we support when they're in high school.
That's amazing. And so we talked about the support. Before I jump into that, I want to ask you, let's refine for whoever's listening to this, and especially if you're an asset manager, wealth manager, right? This is probably perking up your ears as an opportunity to get involved. Who are the players? We know it's the students and their families, right? Who are the other players that are involved that either support or really are your target audience to build this and make this all? There's the teachers. Give me that whole list.
Well, What we are doing is we are helping schools to meet that new personal finance mandate, but then we are trying to activate some of the other players that you just mentioned to really go beyond the mandate and bring personal finance to life. And what I mean by that is to bring opportunities in the financial services industry into classrooms and bring the students in the classrooms out to the financial services industry and make sure everyone's working together. We're working with banks. We're running a pilot right now where we are giving every student in a graduating class at one high school, Pickett in Germantown, Philadelphia, $100 when they create an account at a credit union. And that is an asset for them to build upon as they graduate from high school, to build, as they're actually using it as a secured credit product so they can also build their credit score by the time that they graduate.
Wow.
So that is one way to partner. We're having guest speakers in our classroom all the time. So if you have any sort of industry expertise of how you would like to share about budgeting or credit or investing with our students, we'd welcome you to come into our classrooms and share that with our students. We're bringing students out to places like Vanguard. We're bringing them to their corporate headquarters in March for our annual Teen Investors Summit. We'll be bringing 200 students, something like 85 volunteers together to talk about investing, beginner investing topics, and kicking off an 8-week portfolio challenge where students will invest $20,000 over the course of 8 weeks. And then think about how the returns on those investments can inform their 5, 10, and 20-year financial goals and aspirations. And then finally, of course, helping us to grow our mission and helping us to kind of expand what we're doing, finding the students and teachers that need these supports and interventions, and helping us to support, giving us the funds that we need to support that work in our schools.
That's amazing. And I think I'm going to ask this in a crude way, because as you know, and we were able to do some video projects together for your nonprofit. And specifically whenever our team works with nonprofits, I always like to use the WIFM, what's in it for me, as a guidepost concept of what are the messages that we need to put out, and, you know, selfishly for the nonprofit to get their donors to give, right? So I want to put that hat on right now and kind of ask this in that awkward way that we've already done before. But if I'm a financial advisor, I'm an asset manager, Brendan Clark's great. What a nice guy. I don't have time for this, right? What's in it for me? What do you kind of say to somebody who's sort of wondering if they should give of treasures and time to support you guys and continue to grow this?
There are a few main answers I have for what's in it for me. One is,
I thought you might, by the way.
one is just on a personal, in a personal sense, the immediate gratification you will inevitably have from connecting with our students in our mission. There's a lot of joy in our work. Students see the relevance in what they're learning and they get excited about it. It really lights them up. And getting to see that learning joy is something that's really been absent from a lot of education over the past few years, especially in the wake of COVID. And so I just invite anybody to come see that in action and let it lift them up. So that's one. That's not that selfish, though, but it is. It's really important to feel joyful from your philanthropic support.
Well, it's also, I think it aligns, right? Because if you are in this space, right? Like if I've done this before where we've seen the high school podcast class or the high school video production team, and like it gets me excited to see that next generation of trying to do those things and figuring out and being innovative and and following in those footsteps. It's a space I'm passionate about. If it's a space you're passionate about as a wealth manager, asset manager, you have a team that does this, like this just gives you that insight into that next generation. Of course, it's going to feel great.
More. Yeah. Secondly, you are cultivating the client pipeline of tomorrow. You will all be better off if our whole city is more wealthy and wants to invest their assets to continue to grow.
For sure.
When we don't have money, we can't invest money. If we haven't budgeted properly and managed our credit properly and attained an education in order to be able to invest, we won't be investing with asset managers and wealth managers. And so we should all be investing in the next generation of investors. So that's one thing for sure. And then thirdly, it's early talent cultivation. I know that our friends in the asset management industry are looking at college internships and thinking a lot about college students and kind of attracting them to work at their companies. Think about it a step further, a step earlier. High school students they don't know what working in finance means. I certainly didn't know what working in finance meant when I was 17 or 18. Showing them that you can work on the 53rd floor of One Liberty Place in a beautiful, shining, gleaming office
Sure.
and make a good living and do something that's really stimulating and exciting. When our students see that, they want to be that. And I think investing in that exposure is really important for cultivating young talent in our city to make sure that these businesses continue to grow and prosper in the future.
That's amazing. Have you seen, do you have any stories or anecdotes of the impact that you guys have had, on the personal finance side, on the pipeline side, and could you share those so that people could come
Yeah.
get a sense?
My most exciting one is actually a student named Issa. Issa was a junior at Bodine High School here in Philadelphia, and he did an internship through our summer experience program at Hamilton Lane. Issa came into our program really shy and arguably full of self-doubt. His teacher was almost reluctant to give him the recommendation for the program, which is a required part of the application process. He said, and I respect his teacher tremendously, but he said, I'm not sure if Issa has it in him. He just doesn't really answer, he doesn't raise his hand in class much. I'm not sure if he has the confidence to do something like this. We saw something in Issa that gave us the confidence he did have what it would take, and he was tremendously successful in the experienceship at Hamilton Lane, which is a huge global alternative asset manager in Conshohocken, and Issa thrived there. After that opportunity, Issa kind of was on a roll. He had some momentum. He applied for a program that we ran out of Macquarie Asset Management, where he would be sponsored to study for the FINRA SIE, which is the Securities Industries Essentials Assessment. It is a really, really rigorous test. It required Issa doing something like 2,900 practice questions to prepare himself over the course of 8 weeks to study for this test.
Okay.
He passed. He's probably, they wouldn't confirm it for us, the single youngest person who's 18 years old to pass that test. And he has that credential now that he can take anywhere, and companies will be lucky to have him. He's prepared. He has a credential that most companies have to pay people to study for when they're already hired. And we just can't wait to see what Issa's going to do next. But right now, he's a freshman at Drexel University.
Whoa. That is pretty amazing. I think there's so many takeaways from that. We do a lot of work with schools and nonprofits. So we see a lot of the growth mindset, grit storylines. And so there's even one that's a sort of tangential to all of this, which is just to be even selected, that storyline of the teacher having the doubt, right? Because, I'm sure Issa one day will be telling students, standing in front of a room, telling people, hey, raise your hand, ask that question, because if you don't, you might not even get the opportunity, right? Because imagine if you hadn't seen that, right? This story doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. Then there's the whole component of being the young. I mean, there's so many cool aspects to that, and it really, there's no other way to define it. That's true impact, right? Do you have any other sort of anecdotes or stories that are these hero stories? Again, this is what we specialize in, telling these stories. So I love asking.
Yeah. Another story I'll tell is a mother's story. A mother came to us through our adult financial empowerment workshop. She spent 6 weeks with us on Wednesday evenings, learning the basics of budgeting, credit, investing, insurance, college affordability, and how to buy a home and build equity in home ownership. She got, as part of coming as an incentive to come to all 6 of our workshops, a $250 contribution into her child's 529 plan. She didn't have a 529 plan prior to doing these workshops, so we helped her to set one up. When her son, who I think was 10 years old at the time, a couple of months later, when it was his birthday, that mother asked her son, what would you like for your birthday? And she suggested, I'll give you $100 and let's go shopping together. Maybe you can get a new pair of sneakers, which I don't know about your 11-year-old, but that would have been perfect for my 11-year-old. Sure. He would have grabbed that money and we would have gone to Nike. Her son said, Mom, remember that college account you told me about? Let's put that money in there.
Wow.
And so what that kind of says to me is that this mother is centered in the story of telling her son about their plans for their financial future, for his education, saving, investing together. And it's incredible that months later, this young boy kind of had this recall of we are building something together that is more powerful than going shopping and buying a new pair of sneakers. For my birthday, let's co-invest that money for my future. I just love that story. It makes me so excited. And Siobhan, who's the mom that shared that story with me, I'm so proud of her and the capability she's building in her son.
It's incredible. Let's go back a step for a second tell me about your background. How did you get involved in this? And who are you, Kerry?
Um, I'll start with who my parents were. I think is important to share that story. And my mom in particular grew up in poverty. She grew up poor in a 1-bedroom apartment with her mom and 7 brothers. She had 6 brothers and sisters, so 7 kids. 1-bedroom apartment, family of 9. It was tough. They didn't have much, but they did have a value of education. And so it was always instilled in me from the time I was born that education is a pathway to success, and not quite wealth building. That's not what my parents were trying to instill in me, but just comfort and freedom. And so that is something that always stuck with me. I worked hard. My parents worked even harder, but I was lucky to have my first job out of college being on Wall Street as an investment banking analyst. And what that did for me was it showed me that finance is challenging, but not rocket science. And it's a very intimidating thing. It's kind of intentionally built on a lot of systems and vocabulary that feel really inaccessible for most people. But I became somebody that friends and family, older, younger peers would come to and say, I have a financial question. What do you think? And so for the 5 years I spent working on Wall Street and then a couple of years after working in private equity, I really had a lot of anecdotal evidence around me of people not having a solid grasp. Even really smart people, capable people, didn't have a really solid grasp on making financial plans for themselves and their families, whether it be budgeting or investing. These were all questions that were being asked of me constantly in my social life. And I love talking about personal finance, so I was always happy to take that call and answer those questions. I started working full-time in education in 2012, and I was working in a finance and operations kind of lens for my first, how many years? 11 years of working in education. But becoming the founding executive director of Financial Scholars has been a real blessing because it married kind of my 2 passions, which is personal finance and financial literacy with educational access as a real tool for kind of addressing systemic inequities, first of all, but then second of all, just promoting the concept of kind of growing up and, as my family talks about it, just doing a little bit better than your parents did.
Yeah.
That's the American dream. And helping our students to name that and do that and work toward that and feel like they have the roadmap to get there is something that gives me purpose in a really, really deep way.
That's awesome. I know we've been talking a lot about sort of the target audience and people that are the would-be supporters, donors, and focus on asset managers and financial wealth advisors and planners. But it's anybody, right? Like, talk a little bit about some of the donors and the pool that kind of you work with, and let people know, how do they get involved?
Sure. You are so right in that personal finance is for everybody. Everyone needs it. Everyone knows the power of it. And certain industries certainly understand it kind of more deeply and intuitively than others. But I've been really proud to earn the support of a broad base of donors that aren't necessarily bound to the financial services industry. Passionate individuals are welcome to the table. You don't have to have worked in finance to understand that personal finance capability matters in making sure that you have financial freedom as an adult. And the best way to get involved is to go to our website, which is financialscholars.org. That will route you to our local chapters, including Philadelphia, Connecticut. But then also go ahead and tell us if you would like Financial Scholars to come to where you are, to your city or your state. Right now, we're looking actively at New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts as future targets for our organization. But we are willing to have the conversation about going anywhere that this is needed, which we would argue is everywhere.
That is phenomenal. Kerry, thank you so much for coming in today. Again, hit us with that URL one more time.
Financialscholars.org.
Financialscholars.org. Thanks.
Thank you.